What's up, Ravens fans? Welcome into a fresh edition of Ravens Unscripted. As always, coming to you from the lovely Under Armour Performance Center. Week 6 of the NFL season, a lot to get into, so let's not waste any more time. Let me introduce the panel. You know these guys, Cliff Brown, Ryan Mink of Ravens Media, and making his season debut, Jeff Zrebiec of The Athletic. And guys, good to be with you. Let's start with 4 downs. First down, Mr. Mink, you're up first, as always. The offense, through the first 5 weeks, this was a dynamic group. It hit a wall against Cleveland. Your level of concern with this unit after what you saw in this game?
You know, I'm not freaking out. I think that the Ravens
and that's new for you.
That is, I know. I'm usually the crazy one on the couch, but
he's the wacky guy.
Calm, right? You know, they still moved the ball. The Ravens still had over 400 yards of offense. They had 25 first downs. Let's not forget that they threw a bad pick on the goal line, right? They had a field goal that was blocked. Michael Crabtree dropped the potential game-winning touchdown in the back of the end zone. If you don't do those 2 things, and now they still happened, okay? You can't just wipe them away, but odds are that they won't continue to happen in that way, or at least 3 of those big mistakes. If those don't happen, you score over 20 points. So I don't think that this offense just went into total shutdown mode and everything fell apart.
I think it's been a case of, you know, in the past it may have been the case of the personnel wasn't as good and they were overwhelmed by pretty good defenses. I think we saw that a lot last year. When you see them this year, they have fine personnel. There's plays to be made. They just made some mistakes. If they clean that stuff up, I think they'll be fine offensively.
Cliff, just an added layer to this. Do you think this snaps them into sort of a recalibration of, okay, we can't just think that we can show up and put up 25-plus points? Is that something that can be a positive from maybe an outing like this?
Well, I don't think they felt that way going in. I do think this wakes them up into, like, they're going to have to figure out how to counter some things that teams want to do to them. I agree with Jeff. The personnel is better, but I personally thought they were past a performance this bad offensively. And so now that we've seen that, how are they going to make sure that doesn't happen again? And they're learning each other. We've given them so much praise for learning chemistry together quickly. Now, this was the first indication, okay, there's still ways to go with that.
I think that there's some issues, right, that they now have to figure out. There's some issues that even when they were playing well that were problems, right?
That may have been covered up by
Exactly, they were
success.
covered up, right. Like the run game not performing all that well. Crabtree's kind of slow start to the season. Now those got uncovered, and you have to say, all right, we have to either do something else even better, or we have to finally fix those to get back to where we were.
And the good thing is it's still very early in the season. Down number 2, or second down as it's called. Jeff, we'll start with you. Ryan mentioned the drops for Crabtree. And look, I think we touched upon it in last week's show. It's been something that's followed Crabtree his entire career, but it was pretty glaring in this game. What is your sense of how this is going to go this week and for the remainder of this season with a guy who this team's counting on?
Yeah, you know what? Well, first of all, credit Michael Crabtree for taking accountability. He stood in front of his locker, said this game was on me, it should have been over, and we should have won. He also said he's taking this seriously, and if it comes to catching 2,000 balls this week, he'll do it. But in a sense, this is who he is. Michael Crabtree led the league in drops last year. He dropped 13 balls last year. It's not a hands issue. He makes great catches. We've already seen some circus catches this year. It's a concentration issue. So while he has to figure it out, and you can't be dropping 3 passes a game, and he's well ahead of last year's pace, which led the league in drops. But you got to let him figure it out. I don't think you can lose confidence right now. He's a 10-year veteran. I just think you have to trust him and understand that, look, he's going to make some catches that not many other receivers can make, and he's also going to drop a few.
I think it's a big problem for this offense. I mean, I think that if Crabtree isn't beating one-on-one coverage and making the play, then we're going to see more of what the Browns did to the Ravens, which is rolling coverage over to John Brown. If Joe can't rely on Crabtree and trust him, it's a big problem.
You mentioned Joe. Cliff, do you think this affects, in your experience covering Joe, how he looks at a receiver that maybe is having the drops? Is he a type of quarterback where he'll kind of start looking to a different direction?
I think Joe's going to keep going to Crabtree because he has to. Number one, Joe hasn't shown that history either of doing that. I mean, he went to Crabtree in the big spot knowing he'd already dropped 2 passes, and he didn't come up with that one either. So you mentioned, Evan, he's important to the Ravens. They can't hide him. He's going to have to play well, or this offense is not going to be what it could be. I still think it could happen, But yeah, I do like the way he reacted to it because it's a problem that needs to be fixed.
Third down, often described as the money down Cliff. I don't feel great about this, but the finishing of this defense was a narrative going into the season. They'd seemed to put it to bed. Look, they held the Browns to 12 points. Should we be spending any time talking about what the defense didn't do Sunday?
Well, in this particular game, I say no. I mean, if you leave your defense out there for 7 hours, at some point they're going to break down. But I do feel that the Ravens, what they've shown, their body of work over 5 games defensively, is good enough to be a playoff team. So I'm not as concerned that they gave up a big play in overtime when the game should have already been over. I do like the way they have closed games. Haven't given up a touchdown, all year in the second half. So no, I'm not concerned.
Yeah, 15 points they've given up in the second half and overtime all year. It's an offensive game. Teams are going to score. When your defense is out in the field so much, they're going to make some plays on you. And Browns made one play in that game, but otherwise the Ravens defense dominated the Browns offense for most of that game.
Going to echo this. The defense did finish. They finished twice in overtime, getting the Browns off the field. The offense didn't finish the job on the other side.
Well, part of that offense has to be included in special teams, which is a unit here at fourth down that requires some examination. And let's stay with you, Cliff. The blocked field goal, a couple of penalties, a fumble, and there have been some blunders along the way for the special teams. It's usually so rock solid. What do we need to know about how this is going to change?
They need to establish some consistency in a good way. So far, the consistency has been most weeks a mistake on special teams, and it's going to cost them. It cost them against the Cleveland game. I mean, Justin Tucker is basically automatic if you can allow him to kick the football. But twice it hasn't happened. The punt returning, they can't, at least up to this point, have not found a returner they can rely on. So, yeah, those are major issues through only 5 weeks of the season that need to be fixed.
Yeah, I mean, who would have ever thought you look at the Ravens through 5 weeks and the weakest link has been special teams? I mean, annually we see them win games because of special teams. And now we're seeing points being taken off on the board on a weekly basis because of special teams miscues. Two block field goals, block punt that led to a Broncos touchdown. It's way too much. They got a lot of guys on the special teams, a lot of young guys that are still learning. I think Jerry Roethlisberger will figure it out, but it's not been good.
We saw Tim White cut. Any more sweeping changes you expect here?
Well, no. I mean, it looks like they're going to give Cyrus Jones, the Baltimore product, the job. But here's what concerns me.
Fans about that.
He fumbled 5 times in his rookie year on returns. So, you went from Janarian Grant, who had ball security issues, to Tim White, who showed he had ball security issues, to Cyrus Jones, who had ball security issues. The returner thing is, to me, the biggest question and what I'm most concerned about.
Well, after a loss, there's plenty of things that could be thrown in the pressure cooker, and Ryan Mink brought it back. He cooked in it all weekend. Allegedly, it's clean, but we'll bring it out again next year on Unscripted. Stay with us. The new addition to the Unscripted cast this season, it's the pressure cooker, and we bring it back here with this segment. The way this works, it's pretty obvious. The folks here have some footballs that are going to, did you see those hands? Or we're going to represent a player, a coach, a scheme, anything really Ravens related that these guys feel like are under pressure, and they're going to throw it in the pressure cooker. So, Ryan, it's your pressure cooker, man, so you need to kick this off. Who's going in this week?
I'm going to put the Ravens offensive line in. I think that the run game has been most consistently the problem with the offense. And they're using a lot of protection. They're using tight ends to kind of help kick it off, and it's still not getting the job done. The Ravens are near the bottom of the league in terms of average yards per carry. No, I don't think it's a problem with number of carries. It's average
talking about the running game?
Yards per carry. And so I think this really falls on the offensive line. They're doing a good job protecting Joe Flacco, but they have to clear more holes for Alex Collins, because if this running game isn't a threat, then I think it's going to affect the passing game. So
get up there and put it in the pressure cooker.
Who left the rice in here?
Oh, it smells terrible on the set right now. Any disagreement here quickly, you guys, with the idea that this offensive line's under pressure?
No, I mean, Alex Collins is #1 according to Pro Football Focus in broken tackles. I mean, I don't think there's been a lot of yards there for him to gain. It starts up front. They need to, create more holes.
Yeah, I echo that. I mean, they definitely need to raise their level of play if they're going to have a more effective offense and avoid the kind of performance that they had against Cleveland.
And the question comes, at what point do you have to make a change? Do you have to shuffle up that combination? I think that's why they're all going to feel like, all right, if I don't start blocking better in this run game, eventually something's going to get changed.
And they now know that Ryan Mink put him in the pressure cooker. So I really don't think anything could ignite a better performance than that. Jeff, who you got for the pressure cooker?
I'm going to put Alex Collins in the pressure cooker because you're not, he played only 27 snaps against the Cleveland Browns. That's almost half as many as Buck Allen. Now, he's been dealing with some injuries. He's had the fumbling issues. Alex Collins needs to give John Harbaugh a reason to not take him out. He needs to break out. He doesn't have a run over 20 yards yet. And again, I agree with Ryan. It's on the offensive line. It starts with, but they need Collins to look like a feature back. They need him to be better in pass pro. They need him to show a little more out of the backfield. As I said, he needs to convince the coaches that he needs to be on the field a lot more. Not disputing what Buck Allen does, but Alex Collins is still the most dangerous back.
This thing where a term that keeps coming up
because
you have those igniting plays, but then there's the ones that bring you back down.
He gives them too many reasons to take him off the field right now, and he's got to cut that out.
Let me help you out.
Yeah.
Let me help you out here, Jay-Z.
Spin it like Steve Smith.
Oh, with a little flair.
Cliff, you've got our last football here. Who's in your pressure cooker?
Well, I will put Joe Flacco in there, and he throws it a lot better than I do.
Can you throw it in there, Cliff?
I don't know.
Hey!
Right. That was more like a basketball throw. Joe, I mean, that performance against Cleveland reminded me of like when I have to take Robitussin. I mean, I want that taste out of my mouth as quickly as possible. And so I think it's important that he gets right back to the way he was playing through the first 4 games. Very well, with authority. The Cleveland game, to me, hopefully is just an aberration because this offense needs Joe to play well. It's always starts and finishes with him with this team. We talked, early in the season about Lamar Jackson, how much he'd be a part of it. All that to me was background noise. It's about how Joe plays. And I think he's healthy and looked like he was going to be on his way to one of his best seasons. That can still happen, but I just didn't like his body language, even from the start Sunday. It seemed like he could just never get out of the funk he was in. So for me, he's the guy under the pressure cooker. He always, to me, responds well to pressure, so hopefully that'll be the case again this Sunday.
I think Cliff won this segment with just the references to Robitussin and utilizing pressure in a multitude of forms. Well done, my man. Well, before we go to break, guys, an interesting layer to this game in storyline. We love storylines here in the media. Dean Pease, he's on the other side now with the Titans as defensive coordinator. Does it provide, Jeff, a different challenge for this offense? But as this always goes, it's on both sides.
Yeah, I mean, how many times did Joe Flacco look across at a Dean Pease defense in practice over the years? It's an interesting layer. I think you may do things a little bit different to try to throw the other side off. But the bottom line is, when you get down to football, it's winning the matchup in front of you. Can you beat the guy in a one-on-one matchup in front of you? And regardless of what each side knows, and us in the media, we love to make this so complicated and talk about X's, O's, and schemes. But if the Ravens guys are beating the other Titans guys up front, they're going to have success, regardless if Tennessee knows what the Ravens want to do offensively.
I kind of disagree, actually. I think Dean Pease is not going to get a wink of sleep this week. I think that he is.
Oh, so you think it's going to wear on him more than it would?
Oh, I think it's both sides are going to bring some emotions this game. I think Dean Pease ain't going to sleep. He's going to scheme every minute of the day to try to beat the Ravens. And I think the Ravens defensive players want to show Dean Pease, hey, we're still good even when you're not here. They have respect for Dean Pease and what he did as a guy, as a man. He's great.
Yeah.
But they want to show him we're still as good, if not better, without you.
And I think that's a great point. I mean, this is going to mean a lot to Dean Pease for a variety of reasons. Well, after a loss, social media, as we know, can be a dangerous place. We dive into it after this break here on Unscripted. A staple here on Unscripted, it's retweet or delete. I'll read some Ravens-related tweets, and the panel will decide if they're going to retweet it, endorse the idea with the little birdie, or disagree with the delete. Thanks, Mink. Always there for me.
I'm your fan of white, buddy.
First up, we got 2 fans here, too. Logan Levy. 24 pass attempts to 9 rushing attempts when you're leading for a majority of the first half, and Collins is averaging 7 yards per carry is baffling. Not sure every run will be successful, but at least show the Browns different looks. So we waited till segment 3, guys, to talk about the running game. It seems to be, as I mentioned, a staple on this show, but maybe a staple for all fans. Are we retweet or deleting this idea, basically questioning the lack of a commitment to it in the second half? We got a delete from Mink and then 2 retweets. I'll start with you, Ryan, since you're the outlier here.
Well, here's the thing. There's a 19-yard carry on the first play of the game. That skewed the stats. When you look at the run game after that, there's way too many stops in the backfield for 0, 1, -1 yards. I mean, you can juke the stats any way you want, but a run game that has a carry for 19 yards and then 1, 1, 1, 3, that's not a good run game. A run game that is 4 yards, 4 yards, 4 yards, 4 yards, I'm fine with that and sticking with it, but you're just not going to have a successful offense when most of the time you're banging your head against the wall and getting 1 yard out of it.
In that particular game, they needed to run the ball more because, as Jeff said, Joe obviously didn't have it. The game was close all the way throughout. There were so many situations where just a couple of first downs, if they mixed in some more runs, I felt would have actually helped Joe. So overall, as you said, Jeff, I think fans say too much about it. But in this particular game, I think they kind of abandoned the running game too early.
Overarching here, though, and as quickly as you can, it seems to me, traveling around the NFL, the running game idea as being who you are as a team is out the window. It's an important layer, I admit that. What do you feel like is the right sort of mentality for this team to have when it comes to the running game, knowing that it's going to have to be versatile game in and game out?
Yeah, there's no more offensive
Because you
balance.
also brought up a good stat Monday. We mentioned it at the press conference where this team actually is running the ball.
Yeah, they're 7th in the league in rushing attempts right now.
In part because they're running so many plays.
Yeah, that is very true. And they also had week 1 where they basically ran the entire second half as they were up. But yeah, there's no offensive balance anymore. You have to do what gives you the best chance to put the ball in the end zone. But you also have to keep the defense honest a little. And when your quarterback's struggling, that's where you need to rely on your run game a little more.
Yeah, let's find some new narratives, folks. I think there's plenty of room for them. Here, let's see what Chibs has to say about it all. Good news, Ravens fans. The team is still on pace for 10-6. I love how he knows that. It was 1 loss, albeit an ugly one. The important thing is that the team learns from this and moves forward. The game against the Titans will speak volumes for their fortitude. Let's see what our panel thinks here.
That's a tough one.
Okay, Jeff, a delete. So this game, you're saying, will not speak volumes of their fortitude.
Well, I mean, they play
Whatever
the next 4 weeks against teams that made the playoffs last year. And then the 5th time after, it's Cincinnati, and we all know the Ravens' history of Cincinnati. We will learn a lot about the Ravens during the stretch, but I'm not willing to make any overarching, commentary on a road game, in the AFC, it's going to be a tough game to win.
I think it's a huge game. I mean, they made it more huge because they lost in Cleveland.
All right, well, that's your prediction then, Cliff. This is a huge game. Quickly, guys, about 15 seconds. Something you think you'll see Sunday against the Titans?
I think Ravens win with a late defensive stand, which will be ironic given that the failure of them to get a couple kind of, had people turning on Dean Pease. I
think Hayden Hurst didn't see a whole lot from the first-round pick and top overall pick for the Ravens. I think that the tight ends get a little bit more involved and he has a little bit of a breakout.
Well, that'll do it for this episode of Ravens Unscripted. Jeff, thanks for stopping by. Always fun to be with you guys. Enjoy the games, everybody, and we'll see you right back here next week.